Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Hello, and welcome to the Champion Psychology, a show with the goal of openly talking about mental health and gaming, presented by Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org. Every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNE Games, Mitra Jordan and Raffael Boccamazzo, aka Dr. B, talk about mental health and how gaming affects us. If you're there live in the chat, you leave a question that I, Treavor Bettis, will ask them later in the show. Our topic today is asking for help and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, which is a saying you may have heard and that I stumbled over. But before we get to that, Mitra, Dr. B, who are you for the fine folks who may not know?
I'm Mitra Jordan. I am a registered clinical counselor working in Victoria, British Columbia. I see individuals, couples, and basically anyone who feels they could use some therapy and wants to come in the door. Okay, not quite, to be fair. But in any case, I see people, and sometimes we talk about games because I happen to really love games. So tabletop, video, you name it, I like it. Boy, I think it's time someone else spoke, please.
Please. All right. You said
please,
you
go
said
for
please,
it.
so I will
I
speak please.
did. Oh,
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr.
Sorry.
B, Raffael Boccamazzo, Dr. B for long Italian name reasons. I am a clinical psychologist in Washington State. I'm the clinical director of what was the first mental health nonprofit to serve the game community, TakeThis.org. Make sure to go check out our awesome resources that we've got there. I'm also an expert on the applied use of tabletop RPGs in clinical and learning settings. I've worked with a bunch of folks on stuff like that. I occasionally practice, consult with How to ADHD as a psychologist on the channel. I'm around. I do stuff with the things and the people, and I'm often overloaded, which may have been some of the onus for this topic of asking for help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm asking for help right now because the code has expired, as many people have said in chat. We're getting it fixed right now. The mods are helping out. So just
does Dr. B is awesome fit?
Maybe one day.
Not today, apparently.
Not today. The code needs to be made fast. People need their chests, dang it.
Dr. B is awesome. Not today.
That's
what
I
just took. That's what I took away from this.
You know, you take away what you want.
But put something back in return. Jeez. We're fair here. Okay,
so yeah, where do we want to start with? Like, what do we mean when we say pull yourself up by your bootstraps? Like, what's going on?
Well, I mean, that's okay. So if any of you are outside of the United States and Canada in particular, this is one of those idiomatic expressions that gets thrown around, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's supposed to be this staunch declaration of individuality and capability, and we should be able to do these things, and we should be able to do all sorts of stuff. Well, first of all, if you think about the imagery, it is ludicrous to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, which is also the origin of that idiomatic expression. It's a ludicrous idea because gravity is a thing and you are not a cartoon character. I am some days, but that's a different episode. And we have this strong sense of individuality, and by some studies more so than any other country on the planet in the United States, that we should be able to do all the things on our own. We have all these myths around self-made billionaires. We have people who did everything on their own. That is somehow a mark of shame to be bad at something or accept help. And you know what? it is such toxic messaging. It is so toxic.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to talk about that. Like, we wanted to talk about what, quote, should we be able to do as individuals? When should we ask for help? What's the problem with that? What are some of the myths around that? What's some of the toxicity behind this? And so, yeah, there's so much going on that let's talk about it.
All right. I have a thing to say about that. I think there's this idea that this is all or nothing thinking. Excuse me. So the idea, all or nothing thinking is like, I think we've talked about it enough on this stream actually, but it's this idea of if it's wrong, that means it's not right. It's not possible, for instance, to both be wrong and right, right? So it's kind of about that. If anyone helped me, it means I didn't achieve it by myself, which means I didn't succeed. If I ask for help, I failed in some way, right? Or I don't have full ownership over something. The truth is, anything big that we accomplish requires support and help. And it's just insulting to not acknowledge that support and help. You know, somebody who is very successful at running a company probably has a brigade of people around them, both at the company and in their home life, who can support them in that endeavor, right? So nothing we do is done without support. So pulling yourself up by bootstraps, doing it individually, doing it independently, whenever it's a bigger endeavor, just isn't real. And also, if it's an endeavor that really is about me, say my mental health, or seeking, counseling, or even just seeking support from family and friends, there's this idea that I shouldn't be having this problem in the first place, that somehow I should be okay. Which, should, first of all, bad word, useless word.
Sorry,
really.
I just saw that I wasn't being serious.
The code is now officially Dr. B is awesome.
Yes.
So when I asked for help from the mods, Dr. B unknowingly helped out the mods to help out me.
Right,
see how that
but
circle of help worked?
Something. That's right.
Oh my god.
Aw. Well,
Gotta be sure to use that code today. Get your name in there.
Did Dr. B do it all by himself? You see? See? Anyway,
oh my god.
Yes. Yeah. So Trevor, I think that Dr. B needs. Are you with us now? Are you recovered?
Sorry, I had to respond.
I'm back.
You,
okay,
not you.
I've turned my proper shade of translucent.
Oh.
Well, for a week, your name is a code.
Oh my god.
I cannot tell a lie. Dr. B is awesome.
So I've seen this now come up in the chat a couple times, this word should, and the problem with the word should. I want to throw this out there. The word should is not a problem on its own. Okay, hold on.
No.
Hang with me for a sec. Okay, hang with me for a sec.
How dare?
Is he awesome? Truly? I just want to know. Anyway,
okay,
please.
hold on. Okay, on its own, the word should is not a problem, because without the idea that we should do certain things, society as a whole would not exist. I should not sit naked at a populated restaurant and pick my nose while the waiter serves me food. There are rules we agree upon.
Yeah. Then yes.
Okay, but the problem is when these rules about ideals become so hyper rigid that they end up hurting us. And so that we want to be as capable as we can be. Well, that's a lovely ideal. There's also some flexibility there. And being able to seek help when we need, support is different than rigid rules that we should never ask for help. That ultra rigidity there, that's where the word should becomes a problem.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that happens a lot in change processes is you come in with an idea or a goal about what needs to be different. Either it's in a counseling process, or even if it's something like how your garden looks. Like it might be something you're coming in with a set of ideas. Now, depending on how much knowledge and information you have, those ideas might really work in terms of actually applying them. This flower bed over here, that over there, or, the thing I need to fix or change about myself is this thing. Generally, over time, other ideas come out, other possibilities, brainstorming, other understanding of how seasons work and which plants work best next to each other. Any of that is about our growth as people, which is to say, what we think we need to change isn't necessarily what we need to change. What we think we ought to accept about ourselves also varies over time.
Well,
So
I mean,
this plays into the idea of ought to be self-made or ought to be successful or ought to be able to do it by ourselves. We have a specific mindset that is ours based on our experience, our context, and the things we have learned. And that's why it's so important to get input from outside of us. Because if we're just a little encapsulated set of ideas, there's so much we're missing about what's possible. So if I close in and go, I have to pull myself up by my bootstraps, there's all kinds of solutions, all kinds of resources, all kinds of people available to help that I'm not seeing.
Yeah, but no, I can't
My
use
job
those
so
because
much
then
harder.
I'm not an individual.
Right. That's
Because
the toxicity.
Mitra, asking for help is communism.
A
Wow.
sentence I did not expect to ever hear on this show for 400.
I need that in a t-shirt. How long is this?
Oh God! Oh, I just think about how the Simpsons would just make fun of that sort of morality in their early years.
Totally.
Asking for help is what, kids? Communism. Oh my God. No, it's like, okay. There was a statistic several years ago about obtaining jobs in the United States. And, we've got this idea, this myth that, you go and you apply for a job and, you get it on your own merits. When at the time, 70% of jobs were obtained through contacts. Basically, your friends helping you out. The people helping you out. Over 2 out of 3 jobs were obtained because of help.
Yeah.
And how many stories? And we joked about this. We joked about this yesterday. Like, how many stories do we see pop up in the news of, look at what this new self-made millionaire did all on their own with only a $100,000 investment from their parents.
There it is.
And let's not forget that they went to Harvard and all their friends were going to come and support their endeavor and tell their friends, right? You got a whole network there.
Right.
Yeah.
It does genuinely make me laugh every single time when someone does one of those articles and they just put the scene from The Simpsons. Say it. Say it.
With a $50,000 grant from both parents and their grandparents for a $250,000 initial capital.
Yay!
Yes.
And rent
the
paid on
print.
the office for a year.
So if we look at the reality of it, people don't do things on their own. There's a myth and a story that we want to believe about that, but that's not the reality. And I think you're also pointing to another really important piece, which is being able to understand the system and understanding systemic limits. And what I mean by that is that if you're white, rich, and successful, a lot of things will be easier for you than if you're a person of color who may not have access to the same facilities or infrastructure or support or even family know-how. People who come from other countries, like my family is an immigrant family. And when I first came to Canada, my immigrant family, some of whom had lived in Canada for some time, were used to the things that they knew. What they didn't necessarily know was the school system, because they hadn't had anyone who'd gone to school in Canada, who they hadn't really how to get me into high school, how to do this. And they found out those things, but those things were also a little harder to access if you don't have a system for them. Whereas, where I grew up, where my family was used to doing things, it was really easy for them to access those systems. They had a lot of cultural knowledge. And so moving from place to place also limits your cultural knowledge of the new place. You bring a whole set of expertise that you can't necessarily apply. So, that's a piece of it. So if you grow up, if you're a refugee or you grow up in a particularly a less wealthy part of the US even, or Canada, again, there will be fewer resources. And it's not in that case that people aren't intelligent or as resourced as they can be. It's just that there might be less that's available to them. So
Well, yeah,
those are
the
systemic
networks.
factors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually owe a lot of the success in my career to one person, and I can pull it back to that one moment. Not going to call them out because they don't like the public recognition. But they have a very high level job at a very prominent company. I've known them for 25 years. It just happened to be that I know them, and they were always supportive of me through grad school. And when I got my first gig in the game industry, they said, "Let me introduce you to someone." And I had no idea how powerful that sentence was.
Yeah.
Let me introduce you to someone.
Yeah.
And that one person became others. And then suddenly the people I was around had access. And that in and of itself is an incredible thing. And so often what we think of when we think of people who are, self-made, they did the effort, sure, but they also had access. And that's something Mitra's talking about, knowing the system, having access to friends who also have access. Those are so powerful. For anybody who's ever lacked access, in my young life, I mean, my family was not wealthy. My dad was a janitor, so, my mom, when I was 5, managed a fast food store. It's a very different ball game at that point. It blows my mind how untrue this idea of the self-made success actually is.
Yeah, and it isn't a level playing field. I think the biggest piece, though, is knowing what you do have, and then the mentorship and the support and the community to help you understand what you don't, because I think one of the biggest challenges we deal with is we don't know what we don't know.
100%.
So when we encounter a new thing we want to try, or an environment that we're not familiar with, we may think we have an understanding that's based on our previous context or experience, and we may be partly right, but there's also going to be things we miss. And this is where it's so important to have support. And I think that one of the critical things is support from a young age to feel resourced. Your parents don't have to know everything or have everything, but a lot of it is that internal self-worth and learning how to figure out where you can find information, critical thinking skills. And some of this can be absolutely imparted in schools and by parents. And it really comes to understanding your place, how people see you, and recognizing what steps you would need to take, but really acknowledging the help and support of others. Because people are going to want to keep helping you if you're willing to acknowledge their help. They're not going to want to help you if they perceive you as ungrateful or uninterested.
Yeah.
Or, so.
Well, what about, and somebody brought this up in the chat, that luck and opportunities, Yellowstraw mentioned that it's often a numbers game, because it's, we're talking about the right person, the right time, the right place, the right people. And Mitra, in our pre-planning meeting, you brought up the idea of the overnight success.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
that story.
What do you want to talk with the overnight success? What did you want to say about that?
Well, it's a myth. I think so much of the time when people seem to suddenly come out of nowhere and become famous for whatever it is, they've actually been working away for many years. They may even have, for instance, published author, New York Times. They might have 6 other books that they've published, or they might have been rejected 12 times or 15 times or 50 times. There's a lot of people who keep sending their work in. They'll rework it, they'll send it in. So somebody has spent a lot of time honing their craft, whatever it is, or working to keep their company afloat until that moment when, it gets noticed, or they can, they get more investment, or they can afford to hire more people, whatever it is. There's usually been a really tough period where a lot of the learning has happened, and maybe even a fair amount of the failure has happened. Because we talk about overnight success, but we don't talk about the failure that has led to that success.
That's
I mean, go on.
Oh, no. I sorry. I was thinking about George Clooney, as I so often am. No, every time the concept of the overnight success comes up, I think about George Clooney and an interview, a couple of interviews he did after, his big breakout role 25 years ago on ER. And they're like, who is this overnight success George Clooney, who they omitted had done over 100 pilots at that point, had been in pilots for over 100 rejected shows for like a decade and a half. It's not that, he came out of nowhere. It's just that this was the thing. This was the time. This was the place. He was the right guy for that. And it took off. And, then that led to other opportunities and so forth. And that's
Batman.
What's it? We don't talk about that.
Fun little fact for people out there with Batman and Robin: you can actually see the phone cord behind George Clooney where he's phoning it in.
You don't talk about that, Batman.
But that's the thing, though. It's just like people were like, "Oh, overnight success," but like he still had things that weren't great, that weren't good, like and everything like that. But it was still just this amazing. Like he came out of nowhere. It's like, no, he absolutely did. Like I love that people are also finding that with like Pedro Pascal, where they're like, we'd never heard of him before. I'm like, he's in all of these.
He's
things.
in everything.
Yeah.
He's been rescuing children for 25 years. He was just modest up until recently about the special children he was rescuing.
Yeah. That sort of thing. I feel like overnight success, like it's not that it's overnight. Hey, everyone found out about this.
Yeah.
Good.
I was going to say that if we think about films like Hidden Figures and what they show, we see people who were never acknowledged, and I think this is one of the things that often has happened in the past to anyone who hasn't been, a straight white guy, essentially a cis straight, heterosexual, because it's just, I know, but you also haven't taken your position in the world for granted at all, currently, ever. Anyway, let's not talk about that.
This is not my therapy session, Mitra.
It really isn't, and I wouldn't dare to presume. But in all seriousness, I think that this is where often people haven't been recognized for their part in creating success. And I'm sure that for many people, that's led them to feel not super successful, even though they may have been the brains behind certain operations. They may have been people who did much of the work without recognition. So who's winning? I mean, this idea of overnight success, as you say, is toxic. But it's also really disheartening for people who put time and energy and haven't had recognition.
Yeah.
And how do we support that? But that's not really the topic of this.
Well, but I think in a lot of ways it is, because what we're getting to is the influence of system versus the myth of the individual.
Yeah.
Yes.
And honestly, I love listening to like award speeches when they run out of time because they have too many people to thank, and they're trying to get through everybody individually, because, for every one person out in front who's the face of a group, of an organization, there's dozens, if not hundreds of people behind supporting them.
Yeah.
I hate the idea of the auteur that I think a lot of the worst stories I've heard in Hollywood were, auteur directors putting everybody through hell because it's my vision. And
Yeah.
it's just it's a deep problem of doing it mine. It's the seagulls in Finding Nemo all over again, all the time. And so I want to ask, like, how do we get over this? How do we deal with this toxic myth that I have to be good at everything, that I have to have 20s on all of my attributes, that I have to multi-class in everything?
Well, we have to stop idolizing it first, right? We have to stop giving it such a lot of power, because it's not true. We're supporting something that seems like a fun idea and makes a good story, but just really isn't at all true, first of all, and does such a disservice to all of the people who actually supported that person's vision. I think part of a good visionary would be someone who allows people, really encourages them to take ownership of their part in whatever's being created, because then we are more powerful. We are more interesting. At some point, yeah, the person who's most responsible is going to be in the position of saying no or yes, or how do I nourish this, but in a good way? And how do I say next time instead of now? And, there's a whole piece about how leadership works, but a big piece of it is how do we accept or not accept when people are mistreating or not supporting, or expect that it's okay to be overlooked when it's not,
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it.
Yeah.
So that's the systemic. I mean, as you said, this is partly how we work in systems that don't necessarily support us as individuals. But there's a other question around this is, how do we support ourselves as individuals while seeking to broaden that support out to include friends, family, maybe a therapist, maybe other people, maybe medical help, maybe whatever, right? But how do we get that support? And how do we feel okay about that?
That's where that last question, that's where my curiosity is, because because of this myth of the individual hero that we all face, the individual achiever, the to the multi-classer and everything, the hyphenates, the business magnate / rapper / philanthropist / professor / everything. How do we get ourselves to the point where we can even ask for help without shame, of acknowledging that we might have areas of deficit?
I have a weird one that I want to put in here on this.
Mm.
Just because, like, this has been making me think of a weird video game conversation. Hey, we talk about mental health in video games. There is a large group of people in the Soulsborne community that is like, if you summon people, you're a weaker player. If you summoned anyone for any of the boss fights, you didn't actually beat the game on your own merit. And I want to ask those people, hey, maybe if you have a problem asking for help in real life, maybe start doing that in your video games first. Because guess what? It's okay, and it doesn't matter because it's a video game. And
Yeah.
it's always just been weird for me that it's just like, oh no, you can't summon in people because that makes you that means you're not as good. That means you're worse. That you're and that is, in a way, I see as asking for help. You're asking for another player to help you with this boss that is difficult, and asking for help, that's a big no. You can't do that. That means you didn't do it on your own.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's so pervasive, hey,
Yeah.
that this idea, this kind of thinking. Yeah.
Well, I've got, as you're talking about this, Trevor, I had questions about this. Like, okay, what's your ultimate goal here? And transposing it outside of the video game to IRL, is your goal to be an individual, or is your goal to succeed? Because often we can't do both. And if your goal is to be an individual because you just want to see what you can do on your own, you know what? More power to you. If you're a Souls player and you're just like, hey, I want to see what I can accomplish on my own, love to those who get help. That's not what I'm doing.
I mean, I think that's why, like, one of the greatest player stories right now to come out of Elden Ring is a person who named a character Let Me Solo Her. And essentially what this was, this guy decided he wanted to be the best player at fighting this boss named Melania. There we go. I got it there somewhere. And essentially what he does, he made a character, he made this build specifically for fighting her, and then would put his summon sign down, and when people summoned him, they saw the name Let Me Solo Her. And he would literally just be like, you can stand in the back, I got this. And he would run through and beat her by himself. And he did it like over 4,000 times. He did it an amount of times that FromSoft sent him a sword. And I think that's like one of the best things is like, not only was this person a legend because like he could just go solo one of the hardest boss in the game, but he did it in a way to help people. And I love that.
I love this story that that here's someone who has a certain set of skills and is able to say, just basically, I've got this cartoonish image of like just a sign in there. Hi, you having trouble here? I would like to help you out. Just put me in, coach.
I didn't mention the best part, that is he's wearing no armor with a pot on his head and dual wielding katanas.
I don't know who this person is, but I want to be their friend.
Yeah, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. But he's also having fun with it. And he's not, he's not being a jerk about it at all. He's just, this is kind of part of the hobby of playing that game for him, is to do that, it sounds like, and to enjoy that process. Yeah.
There's been really good jokes too that have come, like when I was fighting that boss a few months ago, I found a summon that said, "Let her solo me." And he just ran straight at Melania and just got one shot. It's really funny. I'm like, well, you know what? Your name still was true. I can't be mad at you.
Username legit.
Yeah, checks out. Okay, let's take a quick break to remind our viewers of our disclaimer, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about what to do about this. So be right back.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Now we're back and not starting soon.
We're the starting soon. This is the disembodied voices of the three of us.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else can we do to like not feel embarrassed about asking for help?
I mean, for me, it was going to a therapist. This was a big deal for me. I'll be real here, that this was long before I knew I was autistic, that I knew I had ADHD. I just knew I struggled in certain things. And it's fascinating to me that now that I know I'm autistic and now I know I have ADHD, I have a reason for those struggles. But I shouldn't have needed a reason for those struggles. Okay? Yeah. I should have been able to, and this is where I think I'm using the word should in a really healthy way. I should have been able to give myself the grace to not be good at everything. And for me, going to a therapist to help me untangle a lot of that stuff was incredibly helpful, to reframe some of this stuff. That who cares the reasons? I mean, having a roadmap helps, not gonna lie. But I don't have to be the best at everything all the time. I don't have to be amazing at things all the time. I can be good at some things and let other people be good at other things, and we can be stronger together for it. That's what a lot of therapy does for you, folks.
It does do that. It absolutely does. I certainly had the experience that, and this was certainly academically related to ADHD, where, of course, I was quite good at some things, and then also really, really quite abysmal at others. And this was confusing because it created the idea that I was deliberately failing.
Mm.
And so, as many people with ADHD have experienced, you get those report cards which say things like, um,
Has potential.
Has potential, or needs to apply herself. That was a really big one. And so, I'd sit down to work and I wouldn't be able to apply myself, so to speak, or I'd get distracted, or I'd rather do my English homework or read my literature homework or whatever, because those were strengths, or do some art because I was good at that. And it was easy because I could actually stay focused, right? As we know how that works. But I think that this really created the idea in me that there was something faulty and wrong about me, and that, I couldn't do it on my own. But around me was the message that this is not that hard and you should be able to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so
Oh,
I
God,
think
yeah.
that there are a lot of messages that we get growing up around the idea that we're alone, that help isn't coming, and that this creates that kind of independence, and also fear of vulnerability, because being vulnerable has not been safe. And that goes for environments that are abusive. It goes for environments where there's just an absence of emotional care and attention. It's what we call instrumental care, where there's dinner on the table. You always have the winter boots that you need, but there hasn't been the love and attention to a person's emotional development. And a dismissal of emotion can sometimes be part of that. And so we learn to dismiss our own needs in those ways, right? And so then when we're struggling, there's a twofold problem. One is really being aware of what's actually interfering with our forward momentum, because we may not really have the language for it. And then two is the idea that there isn't any help coming, that no one can help us, that this is exclusively our problem. And that, in fact, to open up about it to someone may be really risky, because if you were demeaned or belittled or ignored or abandoned, it wouldn't feel safe to put yourself out there emotionally, even with a therapist.
Yeah.
And so that's some of the work of undoing that therapy can do, that even good love and friendship can have a hand in it, but it's not another person's responsibility. We have to learn these good boundaries. But it is also true that seeing other families and the things maybe our partner and friends take for granted, that they can own and do deserve, that we can learn it's okay. It didn't have to be this way for us,
I had a thought while you were talking, Mitra, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, it's blowing my mind here that this I didn't realize how much I did certain things that may contribute to other people's sense of inadequacy, because there's certain things that come easy for me. And I'm often quick to dismiss those things as no big deal, because they're easy for me. They're no big deal. Doesn't mean they have to be easy for other people, but they're easy for me. So, it's not that impressive. It's no big deal. But I just realized that the message I may be sending to other people is tacitly, it should be easy for you too. And I just now realized that me actually honoring the difficulty and that as an accomplishment may end up helping other people. I have to build self-esteem. I'm out of here.
That is better than what happened when that got said to me in high school. Because the thing that you were talking about there has just made me think of the times that stuff that got that got said to me in high school. And one of them was like in math class, where it's like, you should be able to do this on your own. And at that point, I'd heard that too many times. I went, who says? And the teacher said, me. And I responded, that's not good enough for me.
Well done. Oh my God.
And then the other one
That's
was
so great.
the like, like, oh, well, you remember all these nerdy things. Why don't you remember any of your schoolwork? And to which I responded, when did they add lightsabers to Waiting for Godot? And then I might pay attention.
I want to see that.
Oh
Right? That would be
desperate-
great. Two Jedi just hanging out. They're like, where's Yoda?
I want to see Waiting for Qui-Gon. All right?
For Qui-Gon!
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Both those times it didn't work out well for me, but it was funny in the moment.
Vladimir and Estragon just took on a whole new tone.
Wow. Okay, my mind's blown.
Yeah.
Also, I wish I'd been in class with you, Trevor. It would have been such a good example for me. When Mrs. Minvala would rant at me about how I didn't know my math homework, which I clearly hadn't done, and I'd have to go stand in the corner. And she never said, hey, is there a reason you're having trouble with math? Can we look at this together? Where are you struggling? No, because there was this idea that they knew it all, and so should I. I should, in the negative sense, be able to pick this up. Yeah.
Yep.
Because that's the message. Absolutely. This should be easy.
Exactly.
Which, by the way, worse words were never spoken in a classroom, I tell you.
Yup.
Yeah.
I want to bring it back to a comment that we had. I forget who, but it was much earlier in the show today in the chat about, we've had several people talk about having an adventuring party. And
yes.
we have if somebody's playing a wizard at our D&D table and they're starting at level 1, we all know who needs protection. All right. We all know as the party, we got to watch their back. And I don't think at least at the tables I play at, there's no shame in that, because we know the wizard has skills that are going to be valuable, especially later on. When they're just sitting back, just drinking their coffee going, meteor swarm. But at the time, we're just like, okay, they have their role to play. Cool. Support characters who have a lot of social skills in games like D&D, they have their part to play, and it ain't on the front lines of combat generally. And we accept that. What I want to challenge a lot of folks here to do, and I'm going to challenge myself to do this, is to have that same acceptance for you and for ourselves. I'm trying to learn that as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay for me to have areas where I struggle. This is me trying to overcome decades of internalized ableism. But we accept that in our D&D characters. Why can we not accept that in ourselves?
So let's talk about shame, because that's exactly what you're talking
Good night,
about.
everybody.
You've mentioned it a couple of times. So I think that this should be easy, or I ought to be better than this, or I ought to be further ahead in my career, whatever it is, right? Somehow I ought to be better. The connecting feeling with that is that internal shame. And it's shame is not all bad, okay? The thing is, shame kind of helps us, it's kind of acts as a barometer on one hand for good social behavior, right? And so there's a purpose to pretty much everything we feel in terms of the emotional significance. But shame is sort of, it can be chronic and problematic for us. And it can certainly come from this not being sufficiently cared for and supported, not being the same or as good as is the perception of as other people. And so there can be internalized shame and even mortification. That sense where, I just wish the floor would open up and swallow me up, after I said X thing or did X thing, I just want to disappear. That's mortification, okay? And so I think that internalized shame can get really hooked on things like, my report card wasn't as good as this one, Freddie over there or whatever, or I did a terrible job making whatever it is, or even things like this show wasn't as good as last week's. Oh God, whatever it is that we're dealing with, there's that sense of shame that gets pulled in, which kind of shuts us down. It's not an enjoyable feeling. Many of us will do everything in the world rather than encounter our own shame, right?
I was going to say, being raised Catholic, it was the water I swam in.
Oh, right. And so the thing is, we kind of have to encounter those parts of ourselves and kind of open the windows and, you know, draw the curtains, you bring some light into it, and actually take a look at how valid it really is in our life now, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So an internalized ableism relates to this. Sorry, it's a direct connection to that shame piece.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, because I shouldn't struggle in the ways I literally have a disability. What sense is that? Like, yeah. If I didn't struggle in these areas to the degree I do, then it wouldn't be a disability, and I somehow shouldn't have the thing that I have.
Yeah,
there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
realized I'm like, yeah, we could probably do a whole episode about that old shame thing.
Oh, I'll lean my chair down. Okay, I was born at a very young age, and
I do want to give a quick anecdote to the thing you're talking about, like mortification thing. The best example of this I have ever seen, and I genuinely wish I could go back in time and just walk over and give this person a hug. I was where I worked in a Barnes & Noble. They walked in, they said hi, they had a smile on their face. They walked over to the new bestsellers, grabbed a book. 6 of them immediately fell off the shelf and just made the loudest falling sound possible.
Done that.
And this guy picks them up, puts them on the shelf, about faces, and walks out of the store. And I wish I had stopped and been like, hey, it's okay. It happens way more often than you think. But I was just like, I would have done the same thing. I would have just been like, nope, that's it for me. Y'all have a great rest of your life. I'll never see you again. Okay, let's get one quick question in here. This is from Reaver01. Question: theoretically, can learning to ask for help and not feeling any sort of guilt help with understanding the independency of folks in society and living with others in a more harmonious way?
I certainly think that learning to ask for help and learning to kind of work with what comes up, right? So if I'm thinking about asking for help and I'm feeling that sense of shame or I'm feeling that sense of inadequacy, that's really important to work with, right? Because unfortunately, if you can't just push past those parts of the self, you have to have some sense of where they're coming from. You don't have to live there, but you have to visit with them, you know, because that way you can also recognize how it comes up for other people and have compassion for it. Because part of that greater harmony you're talking about and then capacity to kind of work with others and help others is like, if I'm asking for help, it can really make it easier for me if I recognize that I can help another person too, and that they will accept that help, right? It's particularly difficult to ask for help from someone with no way to kind of either pay it forward, to feel like I then have something of value to give, right? I feel much more shame, if you will, or I risk feeling more shame if I feel like I don't have any resources to offer myself, or if I don't, you know, there's, I guess what I'm getting at is there's a time where, of course, we need help, and we need help without the measure of paying back. Right. And that usually comes from our
that's what a
family
gift is, right?
and teachers and mentors and so on. Right. But what helps us within us to develop the capacity to offer something to others as well. In terms of growth as a person and continuing capacity to say, I don't know, I need help, or I'll find out. We need to live in that place of being comfortable with what we do know and don't know. That's our self-esteem piece, right? So that every time we need help, the shame piece isn't hooked. And also, I'm a resource capable, helpful person to others, so it's safe to do this, right? That's part of building that within.
Well, one of the I'm just going to speak for myself here, but one of the big challenges that I've faced in learning to ask for help and making it okay is recognizing and getting comfortable with the idea that it's okay to have limits. It's okay to have things that you can't do. And there's certain things that probably, you know, we would say, yeah, obviously. I mean, I will never in my life be able to swim like Michael Phelps.
Yeah.
Okay. And it doesn't matter how hard I try. I am literally not built to do what he does. But also being comfortable with saying there are things I am good at. And so, like Mitra was saying, there's an ego piece to this, of a self-esteem, an internalized self-worth thing, that letting go of this rule that if I work hard enough, I will be good at everything. No. Just talking to myself now. No, Dr. B, no. It's okay to not be good at certain things. It's okay to be bad at certain things. That's where you bring in other people. And I found it took me almost 40 years to figure this out, but those people actually like helping.
Yeah.
It makes them feel good to make me me succeed, because I feel good helping other people. Turns out it's a two-way street.
I'll be honest. I love when I don't have a skill that one of my friends does, because then I get to hype them up. Especially if it's someone asking me for that help and I go, I can't give you that, but I know someone who can.
Oh, you're that guy.
Oh yeah.
You're the guy. Like, I got the friend who, oh my God, my friend is amazing, and let me introduce you to my friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the story of stuff that I enjoy doing. I enjoy being like, here, I can't help. They help.
Yeah, but I mean, it took me, like I said, it took me almost 40 years to start to realize that, wait a minute, if I like helping other people, maybe they like helping other people. And so maybe me asking for help actually benefits us both.
And see, I think where the toxicity, not that this is toxic, this is wonderful what you're saying, where it can get difficult is this idea that only I can help other people.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the ego piece as well that sometimes comes in. So we really have to watch our own kind of corrosive thinking around this. It's like, why should that be the case? And how are you at receiving help? How are you at receiving other things too? How are you receiving feedback, compliments?
I'm working on it.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
Oh, boy. Okay, well, we got to start wrapping things up. This is a great discussion, though. Friends, if people want to find you all on the interwebs, where can they do so?
It's easy. Mitra Jordan, at Mitra Jordan on Twitter, and mitrajordan.com is my website. So, yeah. Like, unlike Dr. Boccamazzo, I got two places. He got many.
I'm in many places at once.
Places.
I am the one who is in many places. Yes. But I'm at the Dr. B, TheeDoctorB as in boy on most socials. But more importantly, go check out TakeThis.org for all the free mental health resources and educational stuff we have. I got a couple more things coming out in the next few weeks in prep for PAX East, where we've got a really killer partnership with the Games and Online Harassment Hotline to try and tag team folks' mental health needs at PAX East. And also, I was on this just released today episode of How to ADHD, talking about our relationship accommodations and being raw, and it's me being honest and not
the
Dr.
small
B.
little YouTube channel,
Yeah, just Jess and I were talking about how we make our relationship work.
Yay! I literally have it up right now. We'll listen to it later. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this week's show. Thank you to Mars and Jordan for moderating the chat and doing a fantastic job. Thank you to all for joining us today and bringing your awesome questions and comments. I believe we actually do have a different thing this week. Tomorrow we're gonna have a special little game of D&D to go out with, because we have some cool creatures coming to the game in familiar form tomorrow, and maybe we'll get to see Lauren run those creatures through a fun little game with some awesome people playing them. So that's going to be at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, and we'll disrupt the schedule a little bit, but you can check out our Twitch, or no, our Twitter, our Reddit, our Discord. I'll get them down one day. I post them there and everything to find out what the schedule is for that, and the rest of the week should be normal. So that is going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you all so much for joining us, and until next week, take care of yourself.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.